third morning at the cabin, and really nice out. Not very many birds out yet. It's pretty early for up here. I can hear the trumpeter swans over on Hawks Pond though, and they must be over a half a mile away, so they're sounding off pretty good this morning. Red-breasted nuthatches are around. My gray jays have been coming in pretty lightly. They're being pretty picky on their food, but I'm sure they're busy raising some young in the nest, so they're well occupied for now. You notice my long locks here. Since my beauty parlor was closed down because of social distancing, I did bring along my new Toro hat, because just to stay presentable as that hair grows during this visit, I think I'm going to need to put the hat on sometimes. You can see the rain barrel system's been working out well. We did get, oh, there's a gray jay flew in. We did get about 18 millimeters of rain the last few days. 18 millimeter, what's that? Well, if you think of 25 millimeter for an inch, you can figure it out, and why the United States isn't on the metric system is beyond me. Things are so simple. Things freeze at 0, they boil at 100 on the centigrade scale too, so don't blame me, I'm all for it. I think I'm going to break out the saw, and it's a nice day, it might rain tomorrow, so start getting a little more trail work done, get some of the logs cut off. Be ready to use that new snow dog next winter. Fixed up some cornbread for breakfast this morning. Now, I know that these Canada jays will peck my hand if I try to give them corn, so I better be ready for some resistance here. He doesn't know it yet. Wait till he comes back. Well, I guess the joke's on me. Canada Jay's not coming back for the rest of the cornbread. He must have found out what it was. It's another beautiful day, but it started out on the cool side. Well above freezing, but still feels good in the morning when I wake up to the stove's going out during the day and the night. But every morning I just take one of these pieces of wood, whoops, found all I really need is like take one piece of wood like that, maybe a little few of my cedar shavings, and then in the wintertime I use newspaper because the birch bark is all under the snow, but And I'm out walking around, when I get back near the cabin, there's always some birch bark laying around, and I picked that up, and that's what I use for my fire start now. If you've never used this, I just wanted to kind of show you what happens here. It burns hot and crackling. It really gets burning hot and just sizzling and cracking, and there's so much resin in there that it really makes a nice hot fire start. I put that piece of birch bark over here on the sand so it could burn out, and just get an idea there that just how hot a good piece of birch bark can burn. The days coming up are supposed to be up in that really nice 20-degree range Celsius, and just like about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so very nice sunny days. Great time to be here. It was dry last fall until some late rains, and been dry this spring, and so far there's only been over 1 or 2 mosquitoes, and I'm hoping it kind of stays that way, but time will tell. With the great weather forecast, I think I can put the snow shovels away. We're done with that, and the way the temps are going, I think I'll be able to have my wool put away by Memorial Day next week. Don't want to have any of those fashion faux pas again. I think today's going to be a good day for taking a nice hike. These are probably the same swans that were over on Hawks Pond. They don't seem too alarmed by me. They're calling here a little bit. That's a nervous chatter, I'd say. But they're not flying off. I've stopped at Jonah's cabin. He was one of the 2 residents in the township when they did the 1950 census. The last time anybody lived up in this township on a permanent basis. The stove remains to the right here. I salvaged all of the white siding off it to brighten up my kitchen at the cabin. Now this picture shows how the cabin was in 1985 when we first started coming back here, and you can see how it was still standing, but again, when the roof starts to go, and then things start to rot. So my friends Brad and Tim, in a much younger day, clowning around outside Jonas's place. Looks like maybe Tim's offered Brad some breakfast there, but you can just see how even just 35 years ago, you could look in the door, you could walk inside. The roof was starting to fall in even then, but it was a neat place to go, and then over the years it's just gone. This opening is about 150 meters west of Jonah's cabin, and I think it's where he kept his horse. It was always a little opening, and I've kept it open, and if we look over this way you'll see a mound, and that's where he threw the manure out of the barn. And walk over and get a little closer, because there's still a little bit of the barn still over there. As I look down from atop the old manure pile, that's what's left of his barn. It's just with some of the roof structure that hasn't quite rotted into the ground yet. But over here I've found bobsled parts. I've found some barbed wire down around the perimeter where he used it to keep his horse in. These lower swampy areas where they would have kept these open, and then they would have gone out and cut and stored the marsh hay to feed the animals over the winter. The next time the beavers use this pond, I'm going to do that little trick of keep smoothing off the top of the dam and kicking the sticks aside and flattening out the mud, and as they bring up more and more mud, I can get a little wider path up here. Right now it looks good now because the grass is down, but once that reed canary grass starts to grow, you have a hard time seeing where to put your foot where you don't fall away. The trail I do have that follows this long beaver dam as it snakes around, it works out really well because you can just see that I know it's swamp into cedar all the way going to the left, and to the right it's the same way. There's no high ground up there, so if it weren't for this nice berm they put up, it'd really be hard trying to slosh your way through these areas. You just really want to watch your step because there's not a lot of room for error. The beavers really like this area because it's well fed by springs. The spring that's west of Hawks Pond, and then it joins a spring that comes down from where I get my water up in another spring, and they combine. They flow down through here, so even in the driest of times there's a good supply of water to keep their ponds open. So they just rotate between Hawks Pond here, and then right now all the beaver activity is down that way. They've got a huge impoundment down there, and they'll stay there till they get all the brush and the trees eaten up, and they'll rotate and start harvesting someplace else. When we first started exploring this piece of the country over here, the beavers had right behind this cabin, they had the water backed right up to just over the bank, and so we dubbed it the lakeside home. Right now it's just a dry swamp out behind, but the beavers will be back, and they'll turn it back into a lakeside home again. And I have had the metal detector over here, and I did call it a clean sweep on at least half this cabin inside there, and then I piled all the stuff that I came across to the right with that bedstead and a lot of tin and things underneath it, so it'll be preserved there for a long, long time. This is the cabin that was unique in that it was made from these big milled planks. I thought they were cedar, but when I started cutting into one I found out they were spruce, but they've held up very well for a lot of years. Anyone recognize what this might have been back in the day? 2 gears, 4 splines on that shaft in there, so they didn't want it moving. The common question I get is, do I ever fish over at Hawks Pond? And the answer is no. This water is very clear, and I've stared into it and I watch, and there's minnows darting around, and I have seen really small northern pike minnows in there. I don't know just how that's working out, but I've never seen anything over about 2.5 inches long. Hawks Pond is fed by some springs, so it's just crystal clear water, and here we're looking down into about 4 feet of water just off my diving board. The weather forecast is calling for some really nice days coming up into the warm enough that the water's going to warm up, and I might even be using that diving board before I go home. There were no swans here on Hawks Pond today, and I'm not surprised because those two, their demeanor kind of told me they were the same ones that I was hanging out with the other day over here. But as the swallows return to Capistrano, they're back out here on Hawks Pond. The tree swallows are flying around, and there's a eastern kingbird. I think a lot of these birds came up on the south wind last night. This big dump here, that's the first bear sign I've seen in 4 or 5 days up here. And it's a mile from the cabin, so that's a good thing. Just like the Canada jays and the cornbread, the joke's on me on that statement. Bear staying away from the cabin? Huh? Stay tuned. Many an evening was spent just like this. The weather was such during my stay up there that this was often possible. The mosquitoes were never really a big issue, maybe right before dark they'd come out. So there was a lot of times that just put that pot of tea on and go out, just sit back, especially after a day on the trail. It really felt good to just sit around and do nothing.